evening, everybody, and welcome to Enlightening Conversations with the YWCA. My name is Lisa Smith. I'll be your host this evening, and we are focusing this evening on the topic of going back to school. Particularly the anxiety, the stress, the angst that children and oftentimes their parents go through as we go through that annual fall change in seasons and change in situations. Because although we went away from school in the early summer and had a summer of play and relaxation, it's now time to go back. So I'm going to introduce you to Corey Reed. Corey is our main speaker this evening. Corey is with True North Wellness Services, and Corey's been with True North since 2011. And she's had increasing roles of responsibility there, starting out as a mobile therapist and behavioral specialist. She's also worked as a school-based program manager and was recently promoted to the role of Director of Children's Services in 2019. Corey is responsible for the oversight of children's services provided in the home, the school, the community, and the autism center settings. So she's got a full plate, and she will be talking to us this evening about the kinds of things that we need to be aware of as children go back to school. If you have questions this evening, please make sure you type them in. Lewis Mart, who you saw at the beginning of our tape, who is handling the tech aspect from the YWCA, is always available to take your questions. He'll transfer them to us, and we'll make sure that we get you an answer. Okay, Corey, take it away.
Hi, I'm Corey Reed from True North Wellness Services, as Lisa said, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about anxiety and the concerns that children and their parents may have as we get ready to go back to school. As we all know, this has been an interesting 2020 and 21, unprecedented in many ways, and that has spiked anxiety in ways that are different than maybe even anxieties in going back to school, or typically going back to school. So at True North, we have been getting ready to go back to school with our clients since about July. And that has been interesting as we have some uncertainty that the schools are probably also dealing with. So one thing we do or we suggest is really starting to try to get your bearings and figure out what you do know and what you don't know. So I know for my own child right now, we don't know his teacher. We don't know, like what classes and whatnot he'll be in, but we do know the school building he's going to. We're able to look at the school calendar to see when back to school night is. We're able to assess at home, does he have a backpack? Does he have, pencils? What might he need? So that's kind of where I would recommend people start, is to sort of assess where you are and where you need to be. So we know that we need to wait on certain things, so we know where my child's teacher is, who the teacher is and whatnot, but I can still start planning now to get him ready for the transition for back to school. So, I know when back to school night is. We're prepared for that. We're able to go and preview the school even by driving by and talking about how we're getting ready to go back to school. The other piece is to take a temperature check or to self-assess how you as a parent or a caregiver are feeling about school coming back. I think this year, more than most, we all have varying levels of excitement for school to come back. And sometimes you have those same feelings all in one day. So I think getting a sense of like where you as an individual stand, and then talking to your child about where they may stand too, because they may have very similar or very different feelings about going back to school than you do. And as a parent or caregiver, it's going to be really important that you're able to sort of check yourself and what your feelings are and not project them onto your child. And that's feelings about everything, going back to school, the transition, mask wearing, not mask wearing, the different bus schedules, and also sort of embracing the uncertainty that's coming with this school year. We were talking before the show started about one of the hard things about COVID specifically is we've been chasing a moving target, and we've always been wanting to reach, this new normal or this new sense of consistency. But it's going to be in our best benefit to sort of live in the now and really just embrace what we know and know that going into 2021, 2022, there are most likely going to be ups and downs and changes that come as the schools are forced to make decisions, as the Department of Education is making decisions, as the government's making decisions, and that is largely out of our hands at this point. So we sort of have to embrace that and go into the school year knowing that, and work with our kids to know that that may happen and we may have changes just like that, like last year, but we're here with them and we're going to get it through it with them, and we're here to support them. So that's where I would really recommend us get starting.
That sounds like a good start, Corey. That sounds like a great start. And let me take a moment to welcome Robbie Mackley. Robbie is a first grade teacher at Park Hills Elementary. Robbie, how long have you been teaching first grade?
First grade, I've been teaching for 11 years.
Okay. All right. And overall?
Overall, 27.
Wow. Wow. You started when you were 3. That's great. You were the teacher in front of the classroom in nursery school, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What grades have you taught other than first grade?
When I first started teaching, I taught 6th grade learning support, and then I did full elementary learning support. I did 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade learning support. I was also an instructional support teacher for 3 years. And then I taught 2nd grade when I was transitioning back to what they call the general ed classroom setting. I came to 2nd grade for a year, and then that's when I moved
then to first grade. Yeah. Okay. So you've run the gamut of younger kids from 6th grade on down. Yeah. Yes. Let me ask you just to lay the groundwork kind of question. When the children come to you in first grade, are most of them coming to you from the full-time kindergarten setting there at Park Hills, or are they coming to you from various kindergartens so that this may also be a new physical setting for them?
Many come from like our first or our kindergarten at Park Hills or within the district. Sometimes it's even just students throughout the district. But often this year I'm seeing, especially, I have several students from outside, the district who moved into the district. I've had over the years some coming in from kindergarten, even from in Maryland. So even across the state lines and so forth. So, and sometimes they're just coming from like a private kindergarten. Some are from, a public school setting. Some are coming from, like a cyber school or a charter school. But the bulk mostly are coming from within the district, our kindergarten.
Okay. All right. How many days of summer are left for your students at Park Hills?
For my students, we start next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. So 1 week.
Yes.
So basically, yeah. What about you, Corey? What about you? Said you have a child. How much is left prior to his starting? I think you said it was a little boy, right?
Yeah, I have a little boy. We go back on the 30th.
The 30th. Okay, so you have a little bit more time. So given the amount of time that is left in the 2 districts that we're looking at, with a little less time for the students that you teach, Robbie, and a little more time for Corey's son. What would you suggest, Robbie, that folks in your district or other districts that are starting soon could do? Corey's got the blessing of a little bit of extra time. What else could parents do that are in your district that don't have a lot of time yet to prepare the kids?
Well, definitely, if like we have our what we call back to school night coming up, we have an open house, which like tonight, for example, we have our kindergartners coming in. First grade is coming, our first grade, and I believe second grade's on Wednesday, and then our upper grades are on Thursday. But definitely make an effort to come to those. We have them run more like an informal type open house where the kids can just come in and meet teachers. Even if they already knew them from the prior year, it's still nice to meet, meet
them again,
knowing that, they are definitely going to be their teacher this year and get to see the classroom. And we have it set up very casual and more, fun, just kind of getting to know you, not a formal presentation, just to try to help ease those anxieties. Mm-hmm. But I know many of us, I personally, because of, just the whole mental health aspect of things is near and dear to my heart. And, I want to make things as easy on the kids as possible, as well as the parents. Because, like Corey was saying, because some of the parents have their own, anxieties and, and things like that they're feeling. So for those, I know they have busy schedules. So for example, I set up like some Zoom sessions for tomorrow for those who aren't able to make it on Wednesday, just so that we can have a conversation, more intimate conversation, like a one-to-one. I know, it won't be in person, but at least, I can sit and talk with them and kind of, answer any questions they may have, and just to try to ease their worries and give them some peace of mind.
That's great.
So,
okay, I think Lou has some questions too. Every time Lou pops up on the screen, he's taking questions from the audience. So, Lou, what do you have for us?
I do have 2 questions.
Okay.
We'll go with the first one first. Are there books you can recommend to read to children in preparation for school to lessen anxiety?
So I would assume, since it said read to children, we're looking at elementary level.
Yep.
Suggestions from either of you?
I definitely, there's always, I always often read like the night before. They have so many books out, like the night before kindergarten or the night before first grade. Those are wonderful books. The first grade jitters talks about
that's a great name.
Even how like the teachers get the jitters. So I often tell my students that they're not the only ones that are nervous, because it's a change. Parents are nervous, even the teachers get nervous, and that kind of makes the kids, because they, I laugh and but the story tells about how the teacher's like so worried and like she's not getting out of bed in the morning, and they portray it as the teacher is like a kid, but then here in the end, it's the teacher who was all worried about going to a new school or, having the changes and stuff. So those are
that's great.
Awesome books.
Yeah.
And I would agree. And I think it just depends on what your hope is for your child to take from the book. Because I would agree with Robbie. There's some really good ones. Like a classic is like, I think it's called Clifford's First School Day, with Clifford, the big red dog.
The big red dog, yep.
Yes, from way back from my childhood. It's still a very popular book. And if your worry is more about your child separating from you, then maybe something like the kissing hand or Llama Llama Mrs. Mama. And again, these are for like very young kids who might be getting ready to come to school. If you're looking for something more that's going to talk to your child about what the day might entail or whatnot, in a pinch, you can always create your own social book that sort of narrates, like, first you're going to get up and then we're going to eat breakfast, and then it's a picture of them eating breakfast. And then the next page is them brushing their teeth. And then the next page is getting dressed, getting on the school bus, waving bye, and then coming home, or working with the teacher if that's an issue later on about what actually happens in the day. If you go back to school nights, a lot of times the teachers will have the schedule, so you can build that into like creating a story.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah. What's our next question, Lou?
Next question kind of brings it full circle on this particular subject. As a childcare provider of school-age students in grades K through 6, we deal with many behavioral issues leading up to school and in the first few weeks. What do you advise YWCA Hanover teachers do to calm students and assist them to make the transition from summertime to back to school?
Okay, so our YWCA childcare providers are the substitute parents for those last couple of weeks. So they're getting the brunt of a lot of that anxiety. Corey, do you have?
So I would say the number one thing as he was talking that came to mind is to be consistent and keep on with whatever routine you have. Because a lot of times when kids are acting out in whatever way, they're sort of testing boundaries, or they're feeling unsafe or uncertain. So the best thing we can do is to keep on with the boundaries and keep on with the routines, and also to, be talking about going back to school, be talking about what their worries or concerns are, and see if you're able to help them address them. The thing that we see that's really interesting, one of the things we see about kids that's really interesting, is sometimes they are willing to talk to teachers, bus drivers, childcare professionals, us as therapists, about things that they don't bring up to their parents. And it's not a preference thing. It's just sometimes daycare providers or teachers just have them in a chatty way. And all of a sudden they share something that the parent had no idea about. And then we can be a liaison to sort of address the problem. So maybe the kid at the YWCA is like, I wonder if the bus is going to get a flat tire. Well, if you can zero in on that there's some fear about going on the bus, then there's certain things that you can do to talk about, like what's a bus? What does it look like? How do you ride it? What would happen if the bus broke down? So I think it's important for us as providers to really cue into those things that they may not be saying at home.
That's interesting that it never crossed my mind that a child would be concerned about something like a flat tire on a bus. But when you said that, what flashed in my mind, Corey, is the evening news and all of those pictures of buses overturning and all, because all of that, I mean, I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And then it's gone. But a child, if they're going to be riding a bus for the first time, that sticks, I would think.
And it's so funny. It just varies from kid to kid. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, sometimes I think the longer you're with the child, you sort of understand maybe like where it comes from. But it could be something so simple as wondering if their classroom is going to be upstairs or downstairs. And you find out that at some point they fell down the stairs. So they're worried about that, or that they, just general curiosity, something that we don't even think about. And they're like, oh yeah, I need to know that. That's what makes me feel uncomfortable. But
it sticks in their head. Yeah. Robbie, you're nodding. I think you've heard some of these stories.
It's some of the most trivial things, some of the things that I've had over the years. And again, like Corey was saying, we are that liaison, and some of the things that these children will just open up to us and share with us. I have in my classroom a worry box, and that way, if I'm busy, because there is a lot that we do in first grade on the academic part, but I'm like, but we're also there on the social emotional part too. And I was like, I want to make sure I'm meeting their needs. And so they will, like, I have just a Dear Mrs. Mackley box where they just want to tell me that they lost a tooth or whatever. But even sometimes some kids will obsess and get upset over their first tooth coming loose. And that might be weighing on their mind, and they're like really shutting down that day or having a bad day. And you don't realize here it's because their tooth is loose and it's the first time that they're experiencing it. And they're worried about it, and then you'll see some certain behaviors. So until they need a way to release that and to open up. So that's why I have like a separate box for like their worries. And we talk about how to express themselves, because often my first graders can't exactly write throughout the year, and I have all different levels of students, but some students will come to me, only writing certain letters and so forth, and they're not writing like full sentences or whatever.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I just have them draw a picture of what they, are feeling or whatever, and then at least putting their name, copying their name, from the name tag, so that I know, okay, this child is worried about something. So then I take the little note and I pull them aside and say, and we talk about it and say, what's bothering you and so forth. But like, she said, it could be the most trivial things, and we need to find ways to help them release that, those things that are bothering them. And as the childcare providers after school, like she said, that consistency and routine is huge for these children, and to transition into the changes, little by little, just one day at a time, is definitely, with the homework and things like that are, sent home. It's a lot to balance.
It makes a big difference. Yeah. Corey, what grade is your child going into?
He's going into fifth.
Fifth. Okay. So slightly older. So have you seen a difference in the level of anxiety as the years have gone by? Or is it because it's a new grade, a new experience, maybe even a new building? I don't know. Does it come up again?
I think for us, we're seeing a lot of anxiety because our school district never went back to school full time. They stayed hybrid the whole year. But I think for kids, we'd be remiss to not talk about the older kids and the why. I'm not sure how Hanover runs their school districts, but when you have sixth graders, if they're going into fifth graders going into sixth graders, can be really anxiety producing. That switch from elementary to middle school, sort of go from being the big kid in the small pond to the small kid in the big pond, could be really, really anxiety producing. I also think that when you get into like fourth seems young, but sometimes fourth, fifth, sixth, you start to see a lot of like social pressure. They start going through puberty. There start to be all of these, it becomes almost like soap opera-esque, like their lives just change. And it's so much about he said this or she said this or this person likes me. And I think with our older kids, we have to, we might not have a worry box, but we still have to tune in and listen, because they may say to some childcare provider or therapist or teacher, like, yeah, I don't like that kid. He's mean to me. Well, we can zero in and say, well, what do you mean? And find out what's going on, because we tend to see bullying a little more prevalent in the fifth, sixth grade than you would necessarily in kindergarten and first.
Yeah.
And I would agree. And they, like, I don't know if it's because of social media or whatever it is, but I'm seeing though that social pressure happening more and more, even in the younger grades, even like third grade and so forth, and worrying about what they look like, and if they're going to be accepted or not, and just certain things like that. And, I know from my own personal experience, even with my, daughter, now I have two grown daughters now, 22 and 20, but I know my one daughter went through some really tough times during those middle school years. And it started like fourth grade, but definitely fifth into sixth. And like you had said, those hormones going, the puberty, the changes. But we noticed some things, in her writing. She started doing some different writing and art and things like that as a way to release and get those worries out. But, those are also kind of red flag times where you want to keep an eye on those things, and see what those changes are. And, are they needing some more help or do they need to talk to someone?
Right. Lou, what are we hearing?
We have a couple of questions here. We'll start with the second one first. Is it appropriate to ask a group of students if they have questions about starting school? And if so, would it be a good idea to ask a teacher from a local school to be present to assist answering questions?
So this might be in a group setting, like a teen meeting or daycare or something like that.
I can't think of any reason that would be a problem. And I think anytime we can bring in other professionals to help, that's fantastic. The only caveat I would put on that is if you have asked the question, you have to be prepared for whatever the answers are that they bring, right? So if you say, are there any concerns, be prepared that some of the concerns could be minor things like, what floor is my classroom on? Or like, is my teacher going to be nice? Or they could be major concerns about bullying and stuff like that. So I don't think there's any problem with it. Just be prepared that when you open the floor, like sometimes the things people say can be shocking.
Yes. Never ask the question if you're not prepared to handle the answer. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Lou, what's our next question?
What if your child is still exhibiting anxiety after a week or more of going to school? What do you do?
So I would say that your first step should be to reach out. Well, the first step should be to talk to your child and see what you can assess from there. My second step would be to reach out to the teacher and or any other professionals working with your child. So if your child also has a therapist or has a daycare provider, maybe check in with them to see if they've noticed any changes and then provide that information to the teacher as well. Teachers can be really great resources for addressing anxiety and give you information on if they're seeing the anxiety in the classroom. I know in my own family, we had a child who was really anxious about first grade. It was their first time in the big school building. They could not cope. They could not cope well with sort of the lack of structure that comes with the beginning of school. Their teacher was very structured, but the first few weeks of school, it's like learning where the bathroom is, learning how to walk in the hallway. And this child just really struggled with that. So the parents talked to the teacher, worked with the guidance counselor. The teacher brought in the guidance counselor, and ultimately this child ended up going to therapy for a little bit just to work through whatever anxiety was sort of behind it. But I think the first steps are really to talk to the child and then the teacher.
That sounds good. Robbie, do you have anything to add to that, or you think that's...
No, I would have said the exact same thing. Obviously, talk to the child first. And then definitely, I often, will tell my parents, we're a team. And, there are some things that I see, in the school setting that maybe the parents don't see. Or there are some things that they see at home that I don't see at school because, children are so different and in different settings. And so, it's like that communication is huge. and
Absolutely.
reaching out and just saying, and like Corey said about teachers being a resource, but anyone, childcare providers, anyone who works closely with your child, is definitely, you have to keep those lines of communication open.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that the more information you can provide to the teacher, the better. So really talking to your child about, what, and it all depends on how verbal your child can be about their anxiety. Some families are very lucky in that their child can say, I worry about this. I'm terrified of the fire alarm going off.
Yeah.
And that is the source of the anxiety. Other kids don't really know, but getting as much information as you can, because then when you have that conversation with the teacher, they can really assess, is this something that they can handle on their own? Do they need to bring in the guidance counselor? Do they need to bring in a mental health professional? And how do you sort of navigate that all? So the more information that can be exchanged, the better off the child is going to ultimately be.
Well, and some children, as they grow older, I'm thinking more beyond that 6th grade level into high school and that sort of thing, they just simply don't talk. They internalize everything, and you can tell that something is wrong. That there's an issue. You assume that it's anxiety by their behavior, but they simply don't talk. Do you have any suggestions on how to kind of pull the information, extract the information when a child just kind of clams up?
So it's sort of funny. One of the things we sort of laugh about in our field a little bit is the power of a deck of cards or Uno cards. You'll see a lot of therapists carry Uno cards or a deck of playing cards. And the reason is, once you get someone's mind off of tell me what's the matter, and you start playing a game or whatever. And when you think about the game Uno, it's not a mindless game, but it's a game that you can play and also do something else. So a lot of times you'll see therapists carry Uno cards because you can be playing it, and that all of a sudden the kids kind of loosen up. The other place that we also tend to see kids really loosen up is on the drive somewhere. So
Yes.
Driving them to a sports practice, driving them to the grocery store. And I recognize that for some kids when they're older and they don't have to go in the car anymore, they don't like to play games, but figuring out what it is that your child does that sort of loosens them up, and taking less of an interrogative approach, so not I know something's wrong with you. Why aren't you telling me, blah, blah, blah. And more of a, we're on a team, I can't help you unless you tell me what's going on. And I can't promise you I can solve the problem, but we can work on it together. Sometimes I think as parents, we're so desperate to know what's the matter that we kind of come at it in a little bit of a harsh way. And it kind of turns especially teenagers off. And then with little kids, sometimes the problem is they have so much to say and so much of it's not really relevant. And you have to kind of weed through what are they actually trying to tell me versus what are they actually saying? So with Robbie's example about the loose tooth, you have a kid who's really hyper vigilant about where is the nurse? And all of a sudden you're why are we worried about the nurse? And then it's well, my tooth, and, it might fall out. And then what if I have a problem? And then what if I lose it? Or what if I eat it in a sandwich? It becomes this whole big thing. So sometimes it's just loosening the lips just enough to get some information out.
Right. Lou, you have another question and a big smile. I think you dealt with that loose tooth scenario at one point.
You never know what's really behind a kid's anxiety is what I've found. So I'm just smiling at all the input from our guests. How do we assist high school students, especially shy kids, with ways to cope with their anxiety and work through it?
So one of the things that the mental health field is really focused on right now is being person-centered. So the idea is all of our treatment is going to be focused on the individual. There's no one size fits all. I mean, there's some things that we know generally work for certain circumstances, but they're all personalized. So especially with high schoolers, you're going to want to find out like what a big interest is or what is the strength of the student and really play to that. So if they love art, how can we use art as a way to cope with what's going on? If they love music, how can we use music to cope? Maybe it's writing. It might be even just teaching them how to do some deep breathing, to take a walk when they're stressed. Maybe making a list, a gratitude list, or having they could have a worry box if they want. It could be the same as Robbie's in her first grade classroom, or it could be something where it's just a list of things that they throw out at the end of the day. I think it's really catered to like, what is the child really interested in? And if they are a shy kid, what is the thing they will talk about? I will tell you, being in the mental health field, I have learned way more about Minecraft, Pokemon, Roblox, and video gaming systems. All of our middle and high school therapists are always exchanging information on gaming and, what's the current like TikTok challenge and all of that kind of stuff. Because for us as therapists, that's how we get in. If we can say to the kids, like, tell me about Minecraft again, like all of a sudden it's like blah, 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 blah. Or tell me about whatever the newest like Xbox game is, then all of a sudden they have a ton to talk about. And then we look for these little pieces to grab onto to say, you know what, that character used a coping skill in that story you were telling me about. Like, how could we add that into your life? Or how could we use that for you? So I would say try to pick up on whatever the child's strength or area of interest is and try to use that.
It's almost like learning their language. And if you don't know their language, you can't speak with them. That's 100%.
Great. I had a client years and years and years ago who was obsessed with Pokemon. And almost every time I saw him, we at least started the session by like, tell me about Pokemon again. And to this day, nearly 15 years later, I still don't know enough about Pokemon to like have an intelligible conversation, but it always loosened him up enough and would kind of make him laugh, because he'd be like, I told you this last time. Yeah. And then we'd kind of laugh. We'd talk about it for a few minutes, and then we'd sort of move on to, the more therapy part of it. But it loosened him up, and it let him know that I heard him and that I cared about what was important to him. Even if in my head, I was like, I have no idea. I'm trying to get through.
It, yeah. So, Lou, what are you hearing from our viewers?
We do have a question here about bullying. What about bullying in the older grades, especially when social media is involved?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Bullying is a really hard subject, I think, in general, but especially for schools. In some ways, schools have their hands tied as far as dealing with bullying. There's a lot of debate and a lot of different perspective about what a school's role is in dealing with bullying, especially if it's cyberbullying or off-campus bullying. And you can always look up the research. There's a lot of chatter every now and then about like what happens at the bus stop, and what about if it happens on the bus, or what if it happens on social media. And we also know that of all the different types of bullying, whether it be verbal, physical, etc., cyberbullying is the hardest for kids to bounce back from, because it lives on in infamy, right? I was lucky enough that social media didn't start till I was in college. That dates me, but I couldn't even have had social media in high school because it didn't exist, or at least my parents didn't let me have it because they thought it was an evil entity that I wasn't going to have any part of. So I think we just have to really be careful and monitor, and not be afraid to monitor our kids' social media and make a determination about when enough is enough, and we're not going to allow it anymore. And that can be really hard, because it's also how kids sort of communicate. I don't know, maybe Robbie can speak more to like from a school's perspective, but I would think at a very minimum, schools would want to know about things that are going on, even if they don't have the ability to mediate it. Because there are some intricacies that I don't fully understand, since I'm not in the education world, about social media bullying, because it doesn't happen on campus. I don't I don't fully know the intricacies of that, but I would think at least with the teacher and probably the guidance counselor and principal would all want to know about what's going on so they could put protections in place.
Yeah, as far as the school perspective, like I am not as like, I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to the like middle school and high school. My husband is a high school teacher. So, and I know it's like a no, bullying, it's no tolerance with that, with when it comes to bullying. They take those things seriously. And, we even at the elementary level, whenever we know about something going on, we try to do whatever it takes within our power. Again, with it, we might not be able to like take action as far as stopping certain things, but we can provide support for that child who, those things are happening to, and provide, as far as supports for the parents and so forth, and like therapy and just, that true support system for them to help deal with it. As far as, like you were saying, there's some things that are within our reach, and then some things that are that are not within our power, to
Right.
stop. But we do want to make sure that we are aware of certain things going on and do whatever we can to help put an end to it.
With that said, I think it's,
go ahead, Corey.
I was going to say, I think it's probably, and this may date me because maybe I don't fully understand social media bullying, but I think it's probably pretty rare for social media bullying to only be on social media. There's probably going to be some carryover into the school, whether it's you're going to hear like gossip about it, or did you see what someone so posted and that kind of thing. So what I would really encourage parents to do, and I've always encouraged the parents I've worked with to do, is to always be very aware of their school's chain of command, which usually starts with the teacher. Yes. And to not just, if this is a serious bullying situation that needs to be addressed, where your child is at risk for harm, mental or physical, talk to the teacher. And if that doesn't get what you need to resolve, follow the chain of command all the way up to the school board if you have to.
Right.
That's what the chain of command is for. And use that if you need to. Sometimes what we see happen, even in my own school district that I live in, is people will say, well, I told the teacher or I told the bus driver and nothing happened. Well, there's other people in the school, and this check and balances to prevent that from stopping. So make sure to follow up, document your conversations, make sure if it is something that happened on the bus, don't assume that the bus driver is having a conversation with the teacher, and don't assume that the teacher is having a conversation with the bus driver. Make sure you're keeping everybody in the loop about what's going on, because sometimes
Absolutely.
the other entity can follow up.
Yeah, because that actually happened last year. There was a child even within my own classroom that was there were some problems happening on the bus, and I didn't know about it. And then when the parent did call me and they were like, the bus driver said, was going to handle this or whatever. And I was like, well, I knew nothing about it. And I said, and honestly, I'm not riding on that bus every day. I don't, talk with all the bus drivers, and so forth. Like, we have assigned duties and so forth, and our interaction with bus drivers are very limited. So I was like, most that I could do was, check in with the office, because truly, that the principals would handle, at least at the elementary level, would handle that. I also spoke with the guidance counselor because I wanted to, again, provide support for that child, and how that child was dealing with this issue that was going on. So I wanted to make sure that the whole team was in the loop with things. But again, there was so much that I didn't know about. And also a lot of it I couldn't do much about, but I could at least tell the people. But I told the parents, I said, please follow through with the office. Go to the principals, because they are the ones that are going to be able to do more than what I could do. But I was glad that at least they told me so that I could, keep an eye on the child when they came in from off the bus in the morning. I could find out, is everything okay? How was the ride? Did, anything happen, and check in with them. Where before, prior to that, the child never expressed to me anything was happening and I didn't know of anything going on.
The other thing I would say is to not put all the responsibility on your child, and don't fully trust your child in these situations, in the sense that sometimes parents will say, well, you need to tell your teacher. That happens sometimes, and it may be like a quarter of the story. In situations that were not super important, I've said to my child, tell your teacher X, Y, and Z. And she gets like A, B, and like part of Z.
Mm-hmm.
But what I always encourage people to do is you want to empower your child to talk to their teacher. It's always a good thing to reinforce. You need to talk to your bus driver. You need to make sure you're telling your teacher. And then what I recommend is just following up with an email. Joey's having a hard time. He shared this. I encouraged him to talk to you about it. I would like, and then follow up that you want to talk to the teacher or principal or whoever it is, whatever chain of command you're on, about it at that time too, because they may if they tell the story, it may not be the full story, and not because they're being intentionally deceiving, but they've lost track of it. They forgot what they were supposed to tell you. Or you have kids who go, okay, yeah, I told Mr. So-and-so, he said to just get over it. And maybe they never told Mr. So-and-so because they were afraid, because they want to get the other kid in trouble. Or maybe Mr. So-and-so wasn't there that day, or they just want to get you off their back. So I think this is one of those times where we have to both empower our kids to take a stand and communicate with staff, but we also have to advocate for our kids too. If we don't advocate for our kids, who will?
Exactly. So let me go to Lou, and then we'll maybe come back to this after whatever Lou has to say. You have questions?
Kids will be kids, won't they? So the next question is, what are the supports within the school, I guess, for both kids and especially parents?
So I will give you what I know, and then maybe if Robbie pops back in, she can chime in with more specific. But so your first line of support is going to be your teachers, then your guidance counselors, and some schools may have a school social worker. It just depends. Some schools have a social work position and some don't. They are really good for resources as far as, basically any kind of resource, housing. They can hook you up with testing. They can connect you with counselors for like testing within the school and whatnot. You would interact with your school psychologists or your guidance counselors to get that set up. Most districts, not all, but most or many, have a agreement with a local mental health provider to provide outpatient therapy services, the same thing that you would get in, an outpatient setting, except that it's in the schools. True North is in a number of districts and are able to provide therapy to kids who need it within the school setting. And then the level of care sort of goes up from there. There's mental health providers who can provide community, home, and school supports, as far as more behavioral supports through school. So if kids are having behavioral problems. And then it sort of goes up from there.
Some schools have a school psychologist as well, correct? Depending
Yes.
on the school district, right? Okay.
Yeah, each school. So we are in, True North is in 9 counties, and in all of the 9 counties, each school has a little bit of a different setup. And for our school-based services, I think we're in 6 counties. And there's no two schools that are exactly the same. Some will have more guidance counselors, others will have more social workers, some will have an outpatient therapy contact. The majority seem to be moving that way. If they don't, they most likely have a list of providers that they can send your child to. And I also don't want to downplay the value of your pediatrician. Pediatricians can be really great resources. Sometimes we think about going to the pediatrician and we think about, breathing, how the heart's working, puberty, whatever the age of your child, but they can be a good resource for if your child has anxiety too. A lot of the major pediatricians will have lists of providers or have some kind of contact to reach out to. And then the other resource that's, again, I think downplayed a little bit is anytime you're looking for an outpatient support, you can always call the number on the back of your health insurance card and ask about what providers are available in your area that take your insurance. And the insurance company should be able to provide you with a list of local providers.
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that though, on the back of the insurance card. Yeah,
oh, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So that's a real good one. I know we don't have too much time left, but before we have to wrap it up, I would like to give a few minutes at least to the cause of the parents. We've talked now almost an hour about the students themselves. And of course, they're our main focus this time of year. But I think we need to think a little bit also about the parents who are experiencing anxiety. I don't think we see too many moms anymore, like they used to joke about the moms sobbing and crying as the children were taken away from them for first grade. I don't think you see that quite as often as you used to, but I think there are a lot of parents who experience anxiety as their children are going off to school. I guess maybe COVID has made it maybe a little bit more so this year because they don't know what the situation's going to be at school. Maybe they've had them home for a year doing school at home. Maybe they're happier they're going back. I don't know. I can recall when our two children were at home, there were some years where I kind of did the happy dance when it was time for school to start. But it was, you always tried to do that when they weren't looking. So they didn't know that I was thrilled they were going back to school, because you always got the question, will you miss me, Mom? And, you wanted to give the appropriate answer. But there are parents who are really going through some angst and anxiety, not only looking at what their children are going to be dealing with school-wise, but also considering the child's moving up a level. Maybe they're going into a high school, going into a middle school, going off to college for the first time. What can we do to help parents? What advice would you have for parents who are facing that first big challenge, whatever level it is?
As you were asking that, I was sort of laughing to myself because I think we gave you the perception that all of that preparation was for the kids, but a lot of it is for the parents, right? I mean, the kids sort of, when they go to a back to school night, they want to see who's in their class. They want to see what their teacher looks like, but it's also a great opportunity for the parent to establish a rapport with the teacher. And if they can't go, even sending an email beforehand that just says, I want to introduce myself, like I often send an email, I want to introduce myself. We're the parents who want to be really involved. Please reach out to us with anything and we're happy to help. Those back to school nights, that prepping yourself, back to school shopping, all of that stuff can be really preparatory for the parent as well. Getting a sense of where we are, what do we need to do? I know Robbie said her families are getting ready to go back to school. And I just have to say it, even though I know people are tired of hearing it, right now, especially if you're going back to school next week, is a great time to get your child back on a good sleep routine and a good diet routine and sort of start practicing all of that. And that's great for the parent too, because it sort of sets us in motion. And recognize too that it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to worry about it. And just like for the kid, you can turn to the parent. The same thing for the parent. You know, coordinating with the teacher about what you're worried about for your kid. They're not your therapist and they're not your teacher, but that's could impact the way they interact with your child. It could impact the way they interact with you. And also, there's therapists who are available to work with anyone who feels like their anxiety level is impeding their daily functioning. Again, you could reach out to someone on the back of your insurance card. True North is in Hanover and York Adams area, so they're always available. You can reach out to them directly, or you can go through your insurance company. But don't hesitate to reach out either for yourself or for your child if you feel like your anxiety or depression or worry is at a place that you need help. There's no problem too big or too small for the therapist to help with.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
You want to be proactive. You don't want to wait till the problem gets so big, you know.
Right.
And communication is the key. I mean, like I said, even on from a teaching aspect and a parent, you know, it's like you need to keep those lines of communication open. And, you know, I know as a teacher, I'd rather know, you know, what your thoughts, you know, even if you're worried about certain things or you have questions, just ask, you know, we don't mind, you know, and if you have so much on your mind at the time, you know, make a list of things and reach out, but keep that line of communication open, you know, and like you said, there's plenty of help out there. Don't wait. No.
And that's also too where we were talking about somebody had asked about other resources. That's a great time to reach out to the other district resources too, whether it's guidance counselors, school social workers, especially can have a bunch of resources that the parents can use, even if it's parent minded. So housing therapy, family therapy, eye doctor care, medical assistance. A lot of times the social workers, that's their job, or guidance counselors, depending on how the school set it up. They're there to support the child, but also the family, because when we support the family, we support the child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think pretty much every district has someone within each building or each level that does that sort of coordination of efforts and organizes that kind of information. Well, I thank you both for all of your help. Do we have a final question here? No?
Nope. Just chiming in at the end. That's all.
Just chiming in. Okay. Well, again, I thank you both for your assistance. I wish you both a very good school year. So, you know, Corey, you have a little bit more summer left, but Robbie, you're right in there in the thick of things already. So, you know, every school starts a little bit differently, but I wish you both well with your student and your students, you know, plural. So I thank you for your assistance. Before we sign off tonight, I want to just reiterate one big point that Corey made is to flip that card over, that insurance card you have, and call that number on the back if you need assistance. That's something I never thought of doing. But I think that's a really good point, to call them and say, I need XYZ. What do you have that you could help me with? I think that's a great point. And turn to your school. Ask your child's teacher, ask the principal, ask whoever is next in command. What do you have that can help my child, my family have a successful year? We will be back on these airwaves or Facebook waves or whatever you want to call them on Tuesday, September 21st. Our topic at that point will be understanding racism, when almost everything you were told about racism is wrong. So this will be an interesting topic. It's for those of us who learned about racism at a certain point in time, and now we come to the point of realizing that I think we had our stories wrong. So join us that evening. I think you'll enjoy our speaker and the questions, and then check the YWCA website, and you'll find some of our other topics coming up in October, November, and the months following. Our thank you again to Corey and to Robbie, and also to Lou and the YWCA for hosting Enlightening Conversations, and to all of you for listening. Thanks and good night.